Thank you. So to Angela's point, I will take a couple minutes for those of you who couldn't attend the first meeting. Again, this whole thing is called the Community Economic Resiliency Fund, or SURF is the acronym, and it's primarily an economic development planning grant. But the point is that it needs to be done differently. And in particular, when it comes to this stakeholder group, is that there's a lot of this needs to be done in an environmentally sustainable way, which has just not been the case in previous kind of iterations of economic development planning and economic development, period. So I think the reason why this stakeholder group is here is to be a check against, just general economic development, but also be a voice of reason and advocate for, well, those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive things, right? You see a lot of green tech coming into the California economy and the Orange County economy that those are things that we could be driving kind of in collaboration with. So one is, of course, to balance out just general economic development to make sure it's done in environmentally sustainable ways, but also through this group, helping us understand what are those opportunities from an economic development standpoint that do meet kind of your environmental sustainability and general goals. Also, I mean, Angela, to the point, a big part of this is equity. Equity across, in all respects, there's actually a need for economic development equity, right? There are some places that are just wealthier than others when it comes to Orange County and across the state of California. But of course, there's environmental inequities, and that also leads to public health inequities. So I'll get into kind of the plan a little bit. But the point is that we are capturing, again, not just to do economic development planning and execution for Orange County, but with those other tenets and values in mind. And then again, as we kind of go into what's in this report, it'll bear this out. So let me just go ahead and share screen here. I'd say this is like primarily the work of our lead researcher and his team, Dr. Wallace Walrod. He just had a conflicting meeting at this time. We're doing a series of these. I'll turn this a series of these depending on stakeholder groups. So this is the kind of the environmental and environmental justice group. But part of SURF is also the input of philanthropy, the input of labor, the input of community-based organizations, of the input of the business community, the input of local governments and other economic development and government agencies. So this is one stakeholder group of many. So we've tried to put as many as we can, and just sometimes it just doesn't line up with people's schedules. So I'm happy to stand in. So as David said, a big part of this is a deliverable of the regional plan part 1, which I would define, I try to make it simply like the data and typical research. And David said, then there's a strategies conversation, which we would like to bring this group back maybe towards the end of the year, and then projects. So this is not just some elaborate planning exercise, although plans are important, but that dollars are going to be spent in a way that's, economically more equitable for Orange County and environmentally more sustainable. So that's what we're working towards. But again, this is kind of the big first step in a series of steps here. I would say that, that in this group, there are members, you have colleagues who are your voice when it comes to how these decisions are ultimately made. So yes, I think we wanted to broaden the representation and we wanted input, but know that there are people on this call who will be the strongest advocates for the input that's being received here, and just generally, again, to make sure that these things are done in an environmentally sustainable way. So this is kind of what we've done. We broke down the SURF presentations or the research. Actually, if I may, let me actually just let me try to drop something in the chat here. If I could just pull it up. Sorry, jumped ahead real quick. I think again the report was shared with you, but let me exit real quick just to drop it in the chat. The full report is here. And so again, for everyone to take a look at. Sorry, let me just make sure that's, I know that was shared previously, but it helps to just have it handy. And so if you think about economic development and you think about all the different stakeholders, as Gary said, it's a lot of information to cover. Obviously, all of you are the experts when it comes to environmental equity or just kind of the environment in general. But one is your counterparts on this decision-making body need to be more educated about the things that you know well. And conversely, if you're not following labor market analysis and industry cluster analysis and public health, you need to somewhat be, or at least your HRTC colleagues need to be educated enough so we can make decisions on these things. So that's kind of what we tried to do. We tried to break these down for that group, the HRTC, in more PowerPoint presentations. Then we went through a full narrative. And that's what was dropped in there. And then this is the process to where we want not only input from your colleagues who sit on this high road transition collaborative, but also you, right? That you have colleagues and you have representatives, but not everyone can speak so clearly for everyone else in the group. And this is what the opportunity provides us here. So I think we want to just cover, here's kind of what in the major report. I'm not going to read through this because I'd rather this be more feedback from you. And then of course, when there's one major question about, what are the, let's say, 3 industries that you think are most important? So how do we drive economic development, but in an environmentally sustainable way? Another thing that can be tricky is I'm going to tell you 2 things that contradict yourself. That contradicts itself. It's a big report. And so I think it's obvious for you to jump into the sections that you are most familiar with. That is important that that gets supplemented. And Gary has already done a good job of ensuring that more information about water needs to be in that report. And so we will definitely work on that as we look to improve this report. But as I mentioned, part of this is also the collaborative nature of these decisions. And it's important to hypothetically get your opinions on things that you may not know that much about. And part of this report is to inform you. So when you think about industry clusters, and you may not know much about industry clusters, some of you may not, it's also important to hypothetically get your feedback on that as well. So it's not just a robust environmental report, right? Because I think you already produce those, you already have those, you already work on those. It's about kind of in the context of how do you kind of grow a more equitable and environmentally sustainable economy. So it would be preferable that, you look at other sections, but I want to recognize that it's just human nature because most to dive into those sections, and that because this is a big document, you might do that. So I would just acknowledge that that's totally fine as well. But hypothetically, your input would be great in a variety of sections and not just the one around sustainability, environmental justice, and climate. So I will work like the regional summary. If you look at the report as well, because this is economic development, I would say first.
Jesse?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I see a black page that says loading. You want me to screen share? I can screen share the...
Oh, sure. Let me try to stop share and then reshare.
I can also screen share if it makes it easier.
Sorry. Do you see the deck now? At least one of the slides, or is it still?
No, we don't.
Now, does it come up in the slideshow or does it not show up? I can go back.
It doesn't show up in the slideshow.
Okay,
it just shows when it's minimized.
Sure, I'll just ditch that. This way you see the slides, we'll just keep it this way then. If it's large enough, hopefully it is. Right. So one thing I would just mention again, because this is kind of an economic development plan first, it is kind of weighted towards those topics. But as mentioned, you can't make those decisions in a vacuum. They shouldn't be. And so this is why you have strong inclusion of things like climate and the environment. So just recognize that, I think it's always easy to say like there's not enough on this section. We welcome that feedback. But I guess if you think about these topics, these probably could be 200-page reports per topic. And this is already 250 pages. So, I mean, short of this being a 600-page document, this is why, again, I recognize that maybe some topics may not have as much as others, just because this is kind of, one, we have to respond to what the state wants in the report, and 2, that this is economic development first, but I would say, but not only. And so I want to recognize those things. So as you go through, these are the different things, the different topics that are in there. I don't want to kind of read through them and go through all of them because I'd rather get to the part where you provide more feedback. Again, from now we go for the segments of labor market analysis. So you'll see that in the report as you review. One thing we thought that was important to be additive, and this was before iterative AI kind of came out, the likes of ChatGPT, but of course, that's going to have a profound effect on the economy. It seems like that's what a lot of people are talking about nationwide, globally. And so we actually already kind of thought that was going to be a major impact. And so we have some things around that. And I think I neglected to mention, like, labor is also a major stakeholder here. So we actually got the UCI Labor Center, which is a very new center, to do some analysis around the differentials between having a union job or being under a union contract and not. So same job, apples to apples, how much more are you making if that same job is a union job versus not? So we got that analysis as well. And there's no narrative in the report just yet because they just kind of did that research, but in the updated version, you will see that as well if you so choose. Industry cluster analysis, and then the SWOT analysis, which I think is where we're going to spend most of our time, because our impression is that the SWOT analysis will definitely dovetail to what we think strategies are when we have that conversation later on in the year. I would say, sorry, all feedback is important, don't get me wrong, but really the better the SWOT analysis, the more robust the SWOT analysis, the better it is for the High Road Transition Collaborative to make decisions on strategies, which will then lead to projects, because the projects have to be in alignment or congruent with the strategies that are developed. So that's where I'll spend most of my time. But as I mentioned, if you look at any segment of this report and you have comments, feedback, input, please send them my way. And then I think you'll see in appendices a couple of things. You know, it's a lot of stuff. So we did try to just have the researchers distill things into 3 key points. You might want to maybe jump to that section. That might help give you kind of high level. Again, reading 250 pages will probably take a lot of time. So if you want to kind of cut that down into 5 or 6. And I think another thing that was important that we just added is the community colleges have done some occupational assessment about, you know, higher paying jobs, more living wage jobs in Orange County, and have been resilient to COVID. So we added that as well, just to be good partners, that research is important for SURF when we think about job quality. So that's included as well if you wanted to take a look. But I would say I'm just going to jump to the SWOT analysis. So SWOT is an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for those who may not be familiar. And I'm not going to kind of read this thing verbatim. We will share the deck with you after, but we just wanted to provide you high level. Here's where we have when it comes to some of the HRTC's input. And from another document that the county of, or the region of Orange County has with the federal government, called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. A lot of those things still hold true because they're maybe structural or long-term trends, but we definitely want to build upon this as we look to create this kind of SURF research plan. And so I'm just going to do the bolded part. Highly educated and qualified workforce. That's a very true high level. You know, I would say when you look at equity, though, when you look at the different numbers, and in the research, you'll see it's not just the top line number, but maybe there's racial ethnic breakdown, what those are, possibly income levels obviously would impact these things. So, but as a general rule, we are very fortunate to have a high education and qualified workforce, but let's acknowledge that's not true of everybody, and that's the equity piece. A strength also is that we are in the middle of this mega region that is Southern California, some 20 to 25 million people, and that is helpful. Because if you want to get to the Inland Empire, if you want to get to LA and San Diego, there's really no better place to be than in Orange County, right? If you're in San Diego, it's a trek to get to LA. If you're in LA, it's a trek to get to San Diego. I mean, it's already a trek from Orange County. So to add that extra distance, that if you're looking about having a footprint, Orange County has been the beneficiary of that to access all those markets. And of course, its proximity to the ports. And we have invested in our transportation system and infrastructure. It's by no means perfect, but Orange County was a self-tax to self-fund some major improvements that you just don't see in the other region. And if you've driven to some of our neighboring counties, you kind of see that, you experience that. We do have world-class educational research institutions, UCI being one of them, but if you look at the rankings of Cal State Fullerton as well, and we even have Chapman University, they are very well regarded nationally. So that's an asset of ours. We are a world famous kind of tourist attraction designation. That is generally wonderful. It drives the economy. If you think about particularly coastal economies, so much of it is kind of driven around tourism. But we also should recognize that some of those jobs aren't high quality or high paying. And that we have to try to think about how are we going to ensure that those jobs can kind of uplift people and have wages that kind of people can sustain themselves on. And we would say this is just kind of a quantitative fact that whenever you see unemployment rates, I mean, it doesn't matter what the macroeconomic kind of picture is, that when unemployment is generally low, Orange County is still the lowest amongst our peers. And even when unemployment is high, yes, in Orange County it becomes higher, but it's still lower. So whether it was COVID or otherwise, the kind of the housing crisis, generally Orange County has always had a lower unemployment rate than the rest of our neighboring counties, which is kind of the best apples to apples comparison. So that's kind of a strength, and that speaks to kind of that I think we have a very diverse economy. And so generally if one industry has trouble, it doesn't take the whole economy down, which could be true of others. I mean, particularly think about like transportation and logistics in the Empire, or what's happening with Hollywood, right, in LA. Those could be issues that impact kind of your unemployment rate and kind of the economic impact of the region. We do have high levels of internet connectivity from an infrastructure standpoint. some of the issues are affordability and quality when you have a lot of density. But when you think about other regions, some people are not connected at all. So there is still a digital divide. I want to acknowledge that, but the infrastructure is there, and we kind of have to do some of the things to make sure that there's adoption. And as I mentioned, we have strong concentrated industry clusters. Medical device is one of them, but it is diverse, and that goes to the next point: diverse and well-rounded economy. That is ultimately a strength, but for some, I think people have already brought up, well, how do you brand Orange County? Like, what is Orange County's like kind of claim to fame? And that can be very difficult because I think we have a variety of industries. However, as I mentioned before, if something impacts that industry in other regions, their economy kind of goes down the tank quickly. So it may be difficult to brand and recruit businesses and to grow a talent pipeline for those industries, but ultimately, I think it's for the better for our economy. From that, are there any other, I'll just stop there. Do people have any recommendations when it comes to strengths that they've heard? And again, you can provide it in feedback. We have the chat. David will follow up with a survey that kind of also asks for the same input. But if people kind of have things now that we should be think about whether around the environment or not, it would be very helpful to kind of take that input in now. If you kind of, I'll try to, David, if you can monitor the chat just because, or people just want to come off mute and provide any. And we record these so we can take notes on the back end also. Yes, John Light.
Just to reiterate, I've been saying for years that Orange County has such a educational, research, and technological might. Why are we not capitalizing on it?
Especially when it comes to the environment.
Yeah.
And climate.
What do you mean by companies starting here, by like the talent, the research,
the talent, the educated workforce, the capabilities of our universities.
We should be able to go green faster than other areas around the country, and we could be a hub around the country. We could be a sustainability
capital or example.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, that's a strength, and it probably even goes to opportunity, right? Because we are not realizing that. So we could, I think we have the as you said, world-class education research institution, but I think what you just said is probably more of an opportunity that we're not truly capitalizing on it. And that is an opportunity for Orange County.
Exactly.
And I think that's what, hopefully through SURF, we can realize a little bit of that, right? That again, that you can have economic growth through clean technology and through a greener economy, and that they're not mutually exclusive.
We've brought that up to the Board of Supervisors as well, because we think we need to partner with them with the might they have and the capital, the funds they have.
And we actually do know that one supervisor is interested if they can help at all. So.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so I mean, the county is involved in this process primarily through the workforce boards, which helps with like talent development and helping people build skills to kind of work in respective economies. So this could be one of those things where, if we're hearing from employers around green technology that they just can't find the skilled workforce, that I think the county with their workforce board funds could help, get people into that talent pipeline.
As long as you're talking about workforce, one important thing to think about going forward is we electrify more and more of our economy. We're going to need electricians like crazy.
Yeah. So the training program, you need 720 hours of some kind of instruction, and then approximately 4 years, 8,000 hours of on-the-job training and experience, and then you go for your exam. But if we could funnel, find some way of funding a specific program in certain disinvested communities to get, because those will be good long-term, well-paying jobs that, will last for quite a while.
Absolutely. So that's helpful as well. If it's not happening, right, then that's clearly a weakness. But then, as you mentioned, if we can build something, then it becomes an opportunity. So that's good. I mean, IBEW is kind of on there. Not that every electrician has to be a union electrician, but they are on the HRTC, as you know, John. And we can have those conversations about what the landscape is as far as how they're training people and how many people they can train. Wonderful, great feedback. Anyone else?
Jesse, I'll just kind of reiterate. I've been communicating with Dr. Walrod and others that I think one of the strengths that we have in particular that we don't really mention is our water resiliency. We're blessed to sit on an aquifer that's 60 million acre feet, and we use very little of it. We restore it, we manage it well, and this area of Orange County can take multiple years of a drought without serious problem at all. And I think that goes to the point that Orange County has for years, for decades, been innovative in water. It developed the groundwater replenishment system, one of its type of treatment plant in the world. And we put it through our sewage through 4 barriers of treatment, almost to a level of distilled water. Then we put it back into the aquifer. And so there's a lot of strengths we have with water technology innovation that I think sets us apart from many other regions of the state.
Wonderful. I think we'll take what you said and kind of put it in an equivalent blurb here. But Gary, yeah, we've seen, obviously I've been on those conversations, and I appreciate that feedback. Anyone else as I kind of move towards weaknesses? Okay, so moving on, lack of unified regional vision. I think that this is what SURF can kind of help directly change and impact. We understand that Orange County is really a place of 34 different cities, all of which I don't think are toxically competing, but there is some competition, especially if you think about potentially economic development and the same particular sales tax dollars, right? Like it's either spent in the city of Anaheim, or it's spent in the city of Newport Beach, or it's spent in a different city. And so those are things that just have to be considered when we think about some of these decisions that are being made. So there's just an understanding there that I think other regions might have already done this process, but we should do more of. And I think SURF is going to be that process that helps. There is a labor force gap. If you listen to employers who probably have the kind of some of these higher paying jobs, they're not quite finding the workers. I think a lot of that is just a function of industry is changing rapidly. I think we all just experience that in our lives. And it's just hard to get someone trained up, right? Like if you have to get a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, or now I think we're working towards more apprenticeships and credentials because they're faster. Like there's just a lag. There's just a lag for you to kind of get the education you need to do some of these jobs. While employers kind of need people now, it's hard to wait 2 to 4 years or longer in order to kind of get those jobs. I think we all recognize that this is an kind of environmental community, but the lack of really affordable housing at all income levels is a real challenge and a real weakness of Orange County. And that kind of dovetails in decreasingly high cost of living. If you want to target anything, there might be other things that are more expensive in Orange County, but really, if you look at it, like the premium comes because of rent and housing costs. And if you remove that, Orange County becomes a lot more of an affordable place. I know that's a big if, but that is true, and that's a real weakness, right? It's really impacting. And I think if we go to the future slide, or a threat is just going to be kind of, we see like declines in population. That's mainly because of it's just becoming so expensive to be here. And you're seeing people like, the growth of the Inland Empire is because of that fact, as people commute in for jobs in LA and Orange County, but also even out of state, the growth of other states as Orange County and California continues to lose people. Orange County is really a small place. It's quite dense as well. And so we have to be creative in kind of where we would put this housing, right? We do have single family lots. So we have to think about, underutilized retail centers or other spaces, because I don't think we don't obviously want to develop on lands that we want as public spaces. So those are taken off. So that means like we have to develop where there are already kind of maybe more urban cores. I think the vulnerability to natural disasters is just true of everybody. I think we're all at least from an earthquake one, right? The big one, we're due kind of any day now on that. So are we truly prepared for that? One thing that also goes to, when you think about people going into the workforce, is childcare supply and cost. That's just another cost that many families just cannot bear, and that prevents people. And we saw it particularly during COVID, who are not entering the workforce or leave the workforce for that factor. And still, environmentally sustainability challenges. I mean, Gary, you said that that's a strength, but I think in other ways we're not doing enough. And I think maybe you guys we could have it at both, and almost both can be true. But again, I think this group would agree that we're not doing enough. And if you want to help us articulate what maybe some of those weaknesses are, please do. Are there any questions about weaknesses, or comments on weaknesses, or recommendations around weaknesses that you experience in Orange County? No, sorry. Oh, sorry, there's still more. And then next is like, we have impacts of AI and automation. That's probably, again, a global one, but it's still going to be true here. Uneven outcomes, this is about the kind of the inequities experienced in Orange County. And at a high level, Orange County's economic numbers look good, but remember I brought up unemployment, right? It's not consistent amongst racial and ethnic lines, right? Educational outcome is not consistent around racial and ethnic lines. And so those are things that we have to try to battle when we think about a more equitable economy. I think income inequality is, again, a global factor and a national factor, but it's still true in Orange County. So we have to, and it can be more acute because of the cost of living. So we have to try to battle that. And then same thing, climate and environmental impacts are also inequitable. Right, that there are people who are living in healthy environments in Orange County. Some of the research, if you kind of go to that part, the difference can be 10 years in life expectancy if you're in some census tracts in Orange County versus others. I mean, this is the same county, 10 years difference in life expectancy. So that's clearly a weakness as well that we have to work through. And even public health, again, inequities, continue to move that. Digital divide, as I mentioned, we have strong infrastructure. It does not mean that it is being accessed equally. And then the potential for infrastructure issues, I think like that's still true. That's still true statewide, but very true of Orange County. And I think then with that, sorry, that's finally over on the weaknesses side. Does anyone have any recommendations on what they've heard or suggestions or feedback?
I'd love to, was the link that we got in the chat for these slides?
No, it's for the full report. This will be shared after, like immediately after you can get this slide deck.
Yeah, I'd love to get a little bit more time to just look it over. I can definitely we're with Orange County Environmental Justice. We can definitely share a lot of the specific environmental health issues that are impacting disinvested or low-income communities in Orange County. And then we'd be happy to share a little bit more detailed description of some of the current public health models, disparities in addressing these issues, and some ways to, recommendations of how to address these things as well through SARE.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you'll get this deck as well. I think that's what the report is going to be more robust in kind of what the data sets are that we have. But again, if you have other data sets that would be helpful to look at, and of course, when we get to the kind of your recommendation will be helpful when we get to strategies, right? So this is like an acknowledgement that there are public health, let's say in particular, I'm just pulling that one out, disparities. And then we have to come up with strategies, as David shared with his, about how do we address that. And so if you already have recommendations, that's wonderful. We could take those now, but they'll be very helpful when the HRTC kind of makes these decisions towards the end of the year. But again, I know the report's a lot, so please, takes your time to digest it. But this is just us trying to condense it down, because it's 250 pages, there's really no way we could cover the entire thing. We wanted to at least focus your time in this context on kind of the SWOT, because again, I think the SWOT is probably the most actionable part of this kind of deliverable. Strategies are obviously going to be very actionable, and of course projects. But you would definitely, I guess a long answer to say you will get this slide deck immediately after this, but we wanted to at least provide you the full report where there's more explanation and context to the data sets.
Yeah, and definitely one of the things I'm thinking of is that there's a lack of investment in jobs related to a transition to like a green economy. So there's not a lot of economic investment in the kind of things that would remediate environmental health issues.
I think, right, and that's a great weakness and opportunity conversation, right? Like we're not doing it, so it's a weakness, and if we start doing it, it could become a real opportunity. So I appreciate that comment. And I mean, David's taking notes as well. Again, we have this recorded because we're gonna condense all this down. So all this input is very valuable. Thank you. Any others on the weakness side? We head over to opportunities.
There's a couple of comments in the chat.
Sure.
Yes.
So let me scroll down. Things on weaknesses. Okay, thank Melanie. We'll pull that in if you need to elaborate more. I mean, we can elaborate now, or I know we're in communication pretty frequently, but we will definitely take that as on the weaknesses side of things. anything else? Or Melody, do you want to anything from verbal context, or is that sufficient? And again, we can pull that into the.
Follow up with my notes on the document.
Okay. Awesome. Then into opportunities. Obviously, if we have inequities, one of the best things you can do, one of the biggest opportunities is to erase some of those, right, and work on the communities that have been truly disinvested. And so that's going to be a primary focus of SURF, and that's something that we should be doing as Orange County for our community. Promote innovation entrepreneurship, as we talked about. They're really, if you think about Orange County compared to others, aren't as many organizations that really support kind of innovation and entrepreneurship, especially I think in this context, when we think about green tech and clean tech. There might be a few, but I think other regions just have more resources and they have more institutions that help with that. That's a real opportunity for us, particularly in the context of SURF and just kind of where the state is heading with its climate goals. Orange County's demographics are changing, not definitely ethnically, that's very clear, but also age, right? We are becoming much older. There's a lot of reasons why that's the case. But that means healthcare is going to become more and more important as our population ages. But of course, when we think about inequities when it comes to the economy or even education, that if certain populations become the plurality, if not the majority, then addressing those inequities will be necessary to keep Orange County competitive from a workforce standpoint, from a job creation standpoint. So that's a real opportunity. I guess you could say it's a weakness that we have those, we said that, but then fixing those definitely becomes an opportunity for us. We do have, again, pretty strong and well-paying industry clusters. How do we have to lean into those? Career technical education to meet those needs. I think the traditional 4-year kind of getting a bachelor's degree model works for some, but the world is becoming a lot more flexible and nimble. And so career technical education, more direct hands-on learning is coming back into vogue. Maybe for some of you, right, it was a popular thing. It was done at the high school level. The state and others disinvested from that, but now there's this recognition of bringing it back, and it's not just shop or wood, shop classes or carpentry, but it is something you could do career technical education around cybersecurity, let's say. So this is also an understanding of what are some 21st century industries that are forming. Building a more economic resilience economy, we do a decent job of that, but that could always be better. And a real opportunity, and I don't think our economy as inclusive as it should be in education and job creation, I kind of mentioned that as well. The better we can be at that, the likely we will be increasing our regional GDP, increasing wealth and prosperity throughout. As I already kind of brought this up, right? Transforming higher education. Not only is it, kind of are people getting 4-year degrees, but the idea of a traditional student of I graduated high school at 18 and by the following fall, I'm somehow in college is just not true. There's so many working parents now entering college. So many people who left, who had to work for a little bit coming back. And that's like what was considered non-traditional is now becoming just as much the norm. How is higher education going to meet the needs of those residents in Orange County? As we mentioned, we really don't have a lot of collaboration when it comes to regional economic development. So developing that's a real opportunity. And reindustrialization strategy is, I think there's this recognition that people are reshoring some of these industries back to California, back to the United States, and that Orange County needs to do its job in getting those that were traditionally outsourced several decades ago. Again, back to the CTE and regional career pathways. I think that was discussed when we talk about green tech and clean tech and the amount of kind of in the electrical sector, the green sector, like how that's going to be important. We already mentioned the weakness of childcare, that it's hard to get people to take training courses and classes if they can't have someone to watch their kids, right? So you could build that program, but if you don't provide some of those support services, they're just not going to go. And then how can we continue to attract and retain world-class employers? We do a decent job of that. We must continue to do so, particularly again, when some employers are moving because of the high cost of living for their employees, right? That they are having difficulty finding talent because of just how expensive it is to be here when you could be in a different state hypothetically, and that person could own a home comfortably and have discretionary money. So that's another option. So before I move over to threats, and again, we hate to end on a down note, but that's just how the acronym is. Does anyone else from other than the comments that provided have feedback on opportunities you see in Orange County that we should try to be aware of as we move through SURF and just general regional economic development planning. Okay, Melanie, I see your comment. Green. Thank you. Anyone else? Again, either via chat or want to express it verbally? Okay. So anyone else?
Jesse?
Yeah.
I just want to mention, just because I just did a greenhouse gas inventory for San Diego Community College District, and we have a lot of community colleges in Orange County, and there's funding gaps sometimes for that. So you've mentioned it well in opportunities, but in particular, our community college districts need that. You know, I know they cut classes. I have an environmental resource management certificate from Orange Coast College, and this semester they cut classes, so that there's still a lot of gap in how community colleges get funded. So I just wanted to bring awareness to that.
Yeah, thank you. I think broadly the community colleges have been an underappreciated resource, especially when we think about this flexibility.
Right.
Yeah. So noted, right? I think there's kind of too much of a push of like everyone needs a 4-year degree when community college is a job. So noted here. I think it's something we have conversations about, and we will incorporate. So thank you. And then Angela, I see your comment. Happy to, because I don't think we're on this Zoom, sorry, but I'm happy to connect immediately after this. If you could send a separate Zoom link or even just want to call me, I'll put my email and my number in the chat at the very end for everybody. But Angela, I see your comment. So threats, as I mentioned, declining population. We've seen declining population in Orange County. Again, the primary driver is just the cost of living. It's hard to have a growing economy if your population is not growing. Those things seem to be kind of a virtuous cycle. Already brought up, I think we all know affordability and high cost of living. That's what's driving the declining population. If we don't find a way to wrap our arms around that, it will make growing the economy in the ways that we want to more difficult. It sounds like a broken record, but because of the affordability and high cost of living, we've seen increased poverty rates, adjusted for cost of living, and homelessness. And I know homelessness is broad, whether you're talking about unsheltered or people who are living in their cars or crowd surfing, whatever the case may be. That's so driven by kind of the high cost of living, which is definitely threatening kind of Orange County's economy and it being equitable in particular. And then there are barriers to entry, kind of the regulatory environment, right? And I think the point of SURF here is, instead of business at odds with the environmental community on something like this, business at odds with, let's say, the labor community when it comes to kind of workforce or kind of job quality and protections, that rightfully so the state has kind of laid the markers down that, again, these should not be mutually exclusive, that you have to find the path forward, that you might have policy battles elsewhere, but that this is not an either or thing. And so I think that's something that it is a threat, but we have to kind of work towards solutions collectively, again, with this stakeholder group and others to get involved. More threat. Mental health is kind of a growing concern that we all have to recognize. We have been informed that I think AI is new and cutting edge, and maybe no one is meeting the moment when it comes to that. But from the person that we had, it's a UCI professor, but he's also a kind of an advisor to the UN when it comes to artificial intelligence. So he really is kind of a globally known in this topic, that Orange County is still behind even other regions. So picking that up in the face of artificial intelligence. And again, water supply uncertainty. Gary, I still think, again, if you like this one or not, please let me know. But I think even though we are better than other regions, that it's still probably back to the point of it's never good enough. And what happens 5 or 10 years, whether we're in a position for that. If you disagree with that, kind of let me know. But we still think that we can always be better in the water supply space, hence a threat, because water is life. Moving forward to climate and urban sustainability challenges, I think as was brought up, kind of Melanie and others, right, that if we don't do a good enough job, it'll not only impact Orange County, but the globe. Coastal erosion was a topic that we had, obviously a very important environmental issue, But in the overlap of this, the intersection of course, even an economic issue, because so much of the economy is driven. So many jobs are in the are on the coast that it's a detriment to the environment. But you're going to be losing jobs and kind of some of the economic driver of Orange County. So recognizing that we have to protect the coast for those two primary reasons, and an increasing older population. Hence, it can be an opportunity if we can get our arms around it, but it can be a threat if you just have, a lot of people who are now retired, hypothetically, versus a very small population who's actually kind of like really working in Orange County. Again, a lot of it's aging in place. There's a lot of factors, but that is definitely a thing that's happening, and it can be a threat to economic growth. Automation impacts, as we brought up, it's been impacting, I think, a lot of industries. Some have been resilient, some others, but I think, again, the proliferation of this now, particularly as it heads into kind of let's say what we call white collar jobs, right? I think like no industry is now going to be immune. I think a lot of industries are actually going to end up adopting it. So what does that mean for the workers and the workforce? Shifting commercial real estate trends, as we saw in the face of COVID. I'm taking this call from my home. Many of you probably are as well. That was not the case really, not even about 4 years ago. And of course, like, as we mentioned, making sure that a natural disaster could always disrupt, that's quite the economic shock. And so with that, do we have any recommendations, as well as you see from the threat side for Orange County, that we are just not prepared for? Thank you, Melanie, for the comment. That's a good data point. Thank you, John and Melissa. Anybody else? If not, I just think the final question. So this is, sorry, did I cut somebody off? Anyone else have a comment or feedback? Then the last one is, this is just due to a shift that I think the state is heading towards, that they do want each region to focus on what they believe at some point to be the 3 top industries to focus on. Of course, as I mentioned, it has to do with environmental sustainability and economic resilience, and there has to be high job quality when it comes to those things. But this is, I think, a major question, as well as SWOT is, what is your opinion on, what are the 3 industries we should be focused on that kind of grow the economy, but again, in those kind of tenets or pillars that I mentioned. If people have ideas, again, we'll take them now, but there's going to be a lot of money invested around building kind of industry collaboratives to grow these industries in Orange County. So it'd be helpful to get people's input on what those are, that we will then, again, lift up to the High Road Transition Collaborative to decide which 3 industries we are going to focus on as a region. So anything, and if anyone has any input there, that would be very helpful as well. And again, we'll incorporate all this. Some have already been brought up on the call, but if you can if you have your top 3 list, please feel free to share in the chat or just say them verbally. But I think people know that question, so I'm just going to stop share. And then if you don't have answers to that, but just people have comments in particular about what you heard, happy to answer questions here. But if that's all as well, then Gary, when you feel like it's appropriate, feel free to adjourn the meeting. People can get some time back on their hand. But I'm going to drop my email in the chat right now for any comments and feedback, and then my phone number as well. And then we'll also drop a survey that might also make it easier to provide input as well.
Jesse, this is Melanie. I do have a question on what's the most helpful mechanism for providing feedback. Do you want like comments in the PDF? Do you want it synthesized in a Word document? Like, I'm a big fan of not creating inefficiencies. So what's most helpful to you?
Yeah, I think if you're going to go with, like the kind of, if you went like point by point on the document, then just, I think, just kind of the section or the line that I think because it's in a PDF form. So if you're able to convert it back to a Word document and just use comments, that's probably the easiest. If that's difficult, then just kind of identifying where the section is and then kind of providing your thoughts, that'll work as well. Yeah. So Linda, thank you for some of those industries to think about. And David dropped the survey and we'll do a follow-up email, but that's primarily focused on the SWOTs and the industry cluster question, not so much about, I mean, we do have a other comment section about the full report, but again, we recommend everyone read the report. That's why it's there. But if you want to focus your time a little bit around, again, I think the SWOT and those industries are probably the most actionable and things that should be taken in consideration for the HRTC. I'm sure all of us have limited time.
Right. Jesse, thank you. You know, it's obvious that there's so much to digest in so much of this. And so, you know, it's important that, you know, you take some time afterwards, try to read as much as you can. And you know, a lot of thoughts come as you have more time to read and stuff. And please feel free to submit comments. They don't have to be elaborate, but just submit ideas and comments, and you know, we're fulfilling what we're supposed to be doing.
Yes, please. I think the point of this is to be just as collaborative as possible. So thank you to Gary to kind of get the outreach to the broader community here, because I think with more input, it gets done better. So again, thank you for your time and your comments, and if you have any others, we look forward to those as well.
So if nobody has anything more, we'll adjourn the meeting. Our hour's almost up, but thank you so much for taking this hour to attend and to participate. We need more, and if you have other friends that you think should be involved, we'll put them on the invitation list.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you heading it up.
Sure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.